Welcome to this detailed summary of the return of Depression economics and the crisis of 2008 by Paul Krugman. In this book, Nobel laureate Paul Krugman analyzes the financial crisis of 2008, its global ramifications, and how it reflects long-standing issues in economic theory and policy. Krugman takes a deep dive into how the world economy arrived at the brink of collapse, examining both the historical context of depressions and the specific causes of the 2008 crisis. This summary will help you understand the key concepts, the role of financial institutions, and the policy responses that shaped the outcome of this critical event. Let's dive right in. Paul Krugman's The Return of Depression Economics and the Crisis of 2008 provides an insightful and critical examination of the financial crisis that nearly collapsed the global economy. In this book, Krugman revisits the economic theories and policy failures that led to the crisis, drawing comparisons to past depressions and providing a framework for understanding the causes and potential solutions. Krugman's expertise as a prominent economist and public intellectual helps illuminate the complexities of the 2008 crisis and its aftermath. Krugman begins by reviewing the history of economic depressions, noting that financial crises have occurred throughout history, often leading to deep economic recessions. He explains that the Great Depression of the 1930s was the model for much of modern macroeconomic theory, especially in terms of understanding the causes of severe economic downturns. Central to Krugman's analysis is the idea that depressions are not merely caused by temporary market fluctuations or external shocks, but by fundamental weaknesses in economic systems, specifically, the financial sector's instability. One of the key themes of the book is that the 2008 financial crisis was not an isolated event, but part of a larger pattern of recurring economic instability. Krugman draws parallels between the 2008 crisis and previous economic crises, particularly the Great Depression, emphasizing that the same economic dynamics were at play. Both crises, Krugman argues, were triggered by speculative bubbles in the financial sector, followed by a collapse in asset prices, which led to a chain reaction of bank failures, falling consumer confidence, and widespread economic dislocation. Krugman also discusses the role of financial deregulation in exacerbating the 2008 crisis. He argues that the loosening of restrictions on financial institutions and the rise of complex financial products, such as mortgage-backed securities and derivatives, created a situation where banks and investors took on excessive risk. This, in turn, made the financial system more vulnerable to shocks. Krugman emphasizes that the rapid growth of the financial sector, fueled by deregulation and speculative behavior, was one of the primary causes of the crash. He critiques the prevailing economic ideology of the time, which prioritized free market policies and believed that financial markets could regulate themselves. As Krugman outlines the events leading up to the crisis, he describes how the housing bubble played a crucial role. The rapid rise in housing prices, fueled by easy credit and speculative investment, led to an unsustainable boom. Krugman explains how the collapse of the housing market in 2007 triggered a chain of events that culminated in the financial meltdown of 2008. As housing prices plummeted, banks found themselves holding large amounts of bad debt, and panic spread throughout the financial system. The result was a credit freeze, where banks were unwilling to lend, and businesses and households faced a severe shortage of liquidity. Krugman's discussion of the financial sector's collapse is central to understanding the crisis. He delves into the role of major financial institutions like Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and AIG, explaining how their failures contributed to the broader collapse. Krugman describes how the interconnectedness of global financial markets amplified the effects of the crisis, as the collapse of major financial institutions led to a loss of confidence in the global banking system. The result was a deep recession, with millions of people losing their jobs, homes, and savings. One of the major policy responses to the crisis that Krugman focuses on is the bailout of financial institutions. He critiques the U.S. government's decision to provide massive financial assistance to banks and other corporations, arguing that it was a case of too big to fail logic. Krugman acknowledges the necessity of stabilizing the financial system but raises concerns about the fairness of bailing out the very institutions that caused the crisis. He argues that, while the bailout was necessary to prevent a complete economic collapse, it also perpetuated the moral hazard problem, where institutions that take on excessive risk are insulated from the consequences of their actions. Krugman also examines the broader policy response to the crisis, including the stimulus packages that were implemented to jumpstart the economy. He argues that, while the stimulus measures were necessary to prevent a deeper recession, they were not as large or aggressive as they should have been. Krugman stresses that the government's response to the crisis was too focused on fiscal austerity and deficit reduction, which he believes hindered economic recovery. He advocates for more robust fiscal stimulus in times of crisis, arguing that governments should use their spending power to offset the negative effects of a recession. Throughout the book, Krugman critiques the dominant economic ideologies that prevailed before and during the crisis. He takes aim at the idea that markets are always efficient and self-correcting, pointing out that the financial crisis exposed the flaws in this view. He also critiques the idea that government intervention in the economy should always be minimal, arguing that in times of crisis, strong government action is necessary to stabilize the economy and protect citizens from the worst effects of economic downturns. In his analysis of the crisis, Krugman addresses the issue of global economic interconnectedness. He explains that the 2008 crisis was not just a U.S. problem, but a global one. The collapse of the U.S. housing market and the subsequent financial meltdown reverberated throughout the global economy, causing economic slowdowns in Europe, Asia, and beyond. Krugman discusses how countries with strong financial links to the U.S. were hit hardest by the crisis, and how international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, were called upon to provide assistance to struggling economies. He also highlights the importance of international coordination in managing the global economic fallout from the crisis. Another critical point Krugman makes is the long-term impact of the crisis on inequality. He argues that the financial collapse disproportionately affected the most vulnerable members of society, leading to a rise in income inequality. While the wealthy benefited from government bailouts and the recovery of financial markets, the middle class and poor saw their wealth and opportunities diminish. Krugman discusses how the crisis exacerbated existing social and economic inequalities, and he argues that addressing inequality must be a central focus of future economic policy. In the latter part of the book, Krugman reflects on the lessons that can be learned from the 2008 crisis. He argues that the crisis should serve as a wake-up call for policymakers and economists, urging them to reconsider their reliance on flawed economic theories and practices. Krugman calls for a more cautious approach to financial deregulation and emphasizes the need for stronger oversight of financial markets to prevent future crises. He also advocates for policies that promote more equitable economic growth, suggesting that addressing inequality and fostering inclusive growth should be a priority in future economic policymaking. Krugman concludes by discussing the prospects for recovery from the crisis and the challenges that lie ahead. He remains cautious but hopeful, arguing that while the economic damage caused by the crisis was severe, there is potential for recovery through sound economic policy. He stresses that recovery will require addressing the underlying structural issues in the economy, such as financial instability and inequality, and that policymakers must remain committed to using government intervention to stabilize the economy when necessary. In summary, the return of Depression economics and the crisis of 2008 offers a thorough analysis of the causes and consequences of the 2008 financial crisis. Through historical context, policy critique, and economic theory, Krugman provides valuable insights into the systemic issues that led to the crisis and the lessons that can be learned for the future. He advocates for more effective government intervention in times of economic distress and stresses the importance of addressing inequality to ensure long-term economic stability. The book is a critical resource for understanding not only the financial crisis but also the broader dynamics of global economics in the 21st century.